Biden's State of the Union disaster. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. And we welcome Matt Morgan with us again. Welcome, Matt.
Oh, always good to be here, Mark.
And this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, it's called Biden's State of the Union disaster. And we have a lot of clips from this State of the Union. You can only imagine what kind of dumpster fires Biden engaged in throughout the State of the Union address. It's just unbelievable. But first up, did you notice, podcast listeners, there were no masks in the chamber when Biden was giving his State of the Union address? What happened? Suddenly, the science has ended. Now that the polls are showing that masks are no longer popular in the United States, the CDC has lifted it. So in the Daily Wire, quote, "It's a State of the Union miracle," Ted Cruz mocks the White House dropping the mask requirement hours before the State of the Union address. And so Ted Cruz tweets out, "It's a State of the Union miracle because they didn't have to wear masks for the first time." Tell me, Matt, if this is a coincidence or did the science suddenly just, get better all of a sudden?
It's so much science. It just coincides with the State of the Union. Look, obviously we've done and said this before. It wasn't the science that changed. It was the polling that's changed. The American public's just had enough of this, and they're really trying to move past it. And I like how they're trying to take credit for it and move on like they've actually solved anything. It's interesting. You look at other State of the Union addresses, it was always about presidents facing other challenges. Well, all the challenges that Biden's really faced with the mask and issues like that have all been self-induced.
Well, the thing is, so let me ask you a question about that. So the CDC said suddenly that, in theory, kids in the classroom don't really need to have masks if you have an infection rate below a certain amount. You know a lot about this because you're actually on the House Government Operations Committee in the House of Delegates in Maryland, which deals with all this healthcare stuff. And it is, granted, complicated. So let's try to take the complications out of it first. What did the CDC say with respect to the infection rate? Or does that matter, or is it the hospitalization rate?
Honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter. A confession rate doesn't matter because there's so many people that are getting such a light variant of getting sick. They're not going to get tested. And when you mail out really millions of test kits, those numbers aren't recorded. So infection rate is almost a meaningless number at this point. Really gets back down to hospitalization. Hospitalization's been dropping. So look, I think as this virus moves through the population, you're having more younger people affected by it. Mm-hmm. Healthier people are affected by it, and it's just not as deadly as it.
And so once they get Omicron, then the bottom line is they have COVID immunity, or they are more immune than they ever were before. But what's fascinating is that the polling has clearly shown that the American people are against this masking as a mandate, right? You can still mask. Don't get triggered out there. You can still mask if you want to get masked. You can still send your kids to get masked if you want to, in the public school system or private school system if you want. But
I know this is hard to believe for Democrats, but Americans like personal choice. That's kind of I thought we fought a war on it at one point.
We did kind of, but then suddenly the CDC, right? See, this is how we know our government agencies are weaponized.
It's proof that the CDC has turned into a political organization.
It's been weaponized. Yes. It has been like the IRS. The IRS has been weaponized. The CDC
Department
has been
weaponized.
Department of Justice, and all of the intelligence agencies in the United States. They're weaponized against regular people because you have this figurehead known as Joe Biden, right? All he is a figurehead. And he's a vessel for, in my opinion, the deep state to be able to run the government, because it's clear this guy's not running the government. And then case in point, the deep state's like, okay, let's lift the mask mandate. The polls are really coming against us, right?
This is the cover up for the midterm elections,
absolutely,
which are going to be atrocious for them. And they should be, because they suck at governing.
They really do. And proof in point, get this, podcast listeners. The comedy sector in the United States, all the woke comedians have gotten the message that now you can actually make jokes about masks. Now, this is important, podcast listeners. I know you're probably out there going, oh, I'm so tired of hearing about masks, Mark. But here's the thing. We have this from SNL. We have a couple of clips that we really want you to listen to. But here's why we're talking about this still. because as you know, mask mandates were just lifted, the mandates by the CDC and by the federal government and many other state governments and so forth. Some local governments still have them. But here's the issue. The issue is that with the comedy sector, they're now actually joking about this. Now, just literally a couple of weeks ago, if you joked about it, YouTube would censor the video.
Right. I mean, we didn't do podcasts on it for a long time because they would pull those videos off. I know my Facebook page was blocked several times. And look, we've been dealing with this for like 2 years.
Fact checkers, right?
Right. And the people, and we were told to follow the science. And those of us that actually did follow the science were the ones that were being the most critiqued and the ones that were just, being banned and censored. I'm waiting for my apology. I've been right.
Absolutely.
Where's my apology?
Well, but here's the thing. SNL, Saturday Night Live finally did a skit on this just last week. And the skit was about masks and how to kind of make fun of the fact that we haven't been able to even talk about this. But where was SNL when people wanted to talk about this? And the thing is, this is so coordinated. The fact that you have mainstream media and mainstream woke comedians now finally talking about it and saying, oh, by the way, we're now a free society again. You can talk again as a free society. It's such a bunch of BS. I can't believe it. Well, we have 2 clips on this podcast, listeners. First up, Saturday Night Live making fun of questioning the whole mask idea. Here's the first clip.
I'm so glad we're doing this. My favorite restaurant with my favorite people.
Honey, I agree 100%.
You know what? This is so fun. Dinner is on us.
Oh, wow. But, Keith, you can take your mask off at the table.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm wearing it half the time.
Well, I heard the CDC is going to lift all mask mandates soon.
Oh, yeah, I know.
It's so weird. It's like COVID's not over, but it's just gonna stop. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me of this article I read.
Oh, honey, no one wants to hear about that.
Well, it was in Bloomberg, and I thought it was interesting.
What article?
Well,
Honey.
it was just saying how mask mandates had, little to no effect on COVID.
So someone in this group that's out to dinner, of course, questions whether masks were ever really a good idea for all the obvious reasons. And SNL makes fun of this because they play this music and it's like, da-da! And then because all the guests around this table are like, no, you can't talk about that. Oh my gosh, it's like still off limits.
Well, it was actually kind of funny because I've been in that situation a bunch of times where people are like, oh, they're paranoid about it. And it gets into the social shaming of what's been going on for the last 2 years. I'm better than you because I'm wearing a mask.
Yeah. And then comedians, they thought it was funny to make fun of anyone who thought it was absurd to wear a mask, like in your car or outside or in the home or in public places and spaces. By the way, I'm talking about the mandate, right? Not the right to do it, but the right to not do it, which is what we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. You could wear a hazmat suit for all I care. It doesn't affect me at all.
Yeah.
And you know what? And some older people, if you're immune compromised on this, you might want to. But at this point, look, this has been out in the population. The masks do virtually nothing. Nothing. And we've been saying this for 2 years now.
Well, how about the fact that SNL has finally gotten the approval from, I guess it's NBC.
How's that approval process works? Is it okay now? Like,
hey, comedians, it's okay to joke about the fact that you can't have a conversation about masks and then put that out there to try to, make comedy about how stupid we were for so long about masks.
Well, we've been creating political theater for 2 years now to keep the population under control. For their safety.
Jimmy Kimmel, when he would go out there amongst all the other woke comedians and they would literally make fun of anyone in society, mostly the so-called deplorables, who didn't think it was necessary to wear masks, and trying to turn a very serious subject about human freedom and the right to your own decisions about healthcare and about your own health. And he tried to turn that into comedy. You know, I mean, it's just like, and it
Well, they
wasn't
try to
funny.
turn it into a damn social score.
Social scores, right?
That's what it is. It's a social score.
And so get this, podcast listeners, we have the second clip with Saturday Night Live making fun of masks, like all the things you really couldn't talk about before. And they're finally breaking new ground in comedy, you know, really new ground in comedy, but actually making it funny to talk about masks. What a bunch of losers on SNL, but it is still funny. But what they don't understand is we're laughing at NBC and SNL about how stupid they are. Here's the clip.
Look, I went to a child's birthday party, self-careful, and they did gymnastics in masks, don't. And then they went into another room and took off their masks to eat pizza. This is the end of me. So did they really need the mask? Oh, no. Did any of us ever need the mask? No!
So that's SNL going, oh no, we can't talk about this. No, this is like still off limits at this stage in the pandemic. Of course, we're no longer in a pandemic, but it's still, we can't talk about it.
I thought that scene was particularly funny because my daughter just lived it about 2 weeks ago. She's at a band competition, and you know they played outside and then go inside and they're eating pizza without the mask. I'm like, this makes no sense. And the most disappointing thing is you had people in education, academia, science, and doctors, not like nobody had any courage to come out and actually like say, you know, this is really not working out. You know, the statistics don't
And
bear this out.
And Matt, the people that had the courage to come out and talk about the fact that masks were questionable, especially for people who are at literally zero risk of ever dying from COVID.
Like everyone in school.
Which is everybody in school. Those people were censored, by all of the media, mainstream media, by big tech and so forth, including Mark and the Millennials. I mean, we tried to talk about it many times. It got through on iTunes. It got through on Spotify, but it would not go through on YouTube.
The big G gotcha.
And Facebook. If you posted to this day, by the way, to this day, when you post something on Facebook about masks and has anything to do related indirectly or directly with COVID, the 15-year-old Facebook fact checkers come out and go, hey, for more information, you must click through here to learn what's really going on.
This is a big deal because, I mean, the CDC didn't seem to follow the science. A lot of the people that we counted on to tell us the truth wouldn't tell us the truth. And big tech and the censorship. I mean, look, Facebook is doing the exact same thing over climate change. You post, man, it's really hot out. It's only March. Censored. Climate change.
Yeah, why is that? I mean, why do they think that they know something that
they're
really
smarter
can't be
than
known?
you, and they're in charge. They're in charge. You're
'cause
just in their world.
If you ask a
It's the
15-year-old,
metaverse.
if you ask the 15-year-old at Facebook that's censoring their stuff, he said, "What is climate change?" I dare say they wouldn't even know how to answer the question, other than to
Sure,
say,
they would. They would go Google up Greta. And like, Greta, how dare you?
Greta Thunberg, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you accuse me of making millions of dollars off of this phony issue? How dare you? So next up, podcast listeners, we have the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire, and it's a big one. So did you watch the State of the Union address and see how bad off Joe Biden is? He can't even talk. Well, Kamala Harris, you know how the vice president of the United States during the State of the Union address and the Speaker of the House sit behind the president of the United States. In the chamber, of course, of the House of Representatives, they sit behind the president of the United States while he is speaking. He's standing up speaking, they sit behind him. Okay, so you have that visual. Kamala is behind him, mouthing the word Ukrainian, because Biden flubbed what he was trying to say and said Iranian or Iranian. I guess that sounds close to Ukrainian. I was always taught to say Iranian. I don't know. You can say it both ways. Tomato, tomato. Doesn't matter because it's unbelievable. The key issue, there are a lot of key issues, but the key issue of foreign policy right now is Russia and Ukraine. And Biden, he's reading off of a teleprompter and still can't get it right. So embarrassing. So imagine when he does this, when you listen to this tweet, when you listen to this clip, you will notice, if you're watching, she's back behind him going, Ukrainian. We have that clip. Here it is.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish our love of freedom, and he will never weaken the resolve of the free world.
So what you heard is the people in the background, of course, which is the United States Congress, United States senators, the Supreme Court. A bunch of them were actually saying, they're laughing. They're like clapping and laughing at the same time. It's like, dude, not Iranian, Ukrainian. Don't you know? I mean,
it's tough, Mark. I mean, they both start with vowels.
Pat, can I buy a consonant, please?
I mean, look, Grandpa made a mistake.
Yeah, Grandpa from what's it? The Simpsons. Yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Well, one day it was the Iranians and was it the Canadians? So, well, I want you to listen to this again, podcast listeners. This is like epic. Here it is. Here's the clip.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people. He'll never extinguish our love of freedom, and he will never weaken the resolve of the free world.
So Molly Hemingway tweeted out while this went on, she went, he's squinting while he's saying it. You know, when Biden, it seemed like he's getting, and they'll never do it again. The Iranians, they'll never do it again. And of course, it's the Ukrainians, you idiot.
Can you imagine the person typing in the teleprompter? Like, does it, next time Ukrainians come up, does it like get capitalized or, I guess it's always capitalized, but is it in bold and maybe underlined?
Matt Walsh tweets out, is anyone else concerned that the president of the United States can barely speak? And then Noam Blum, Biden's speechwriters are not doing him any favors with some of these tongue twister sentences. And then Molly Hemingway again, even by standards of an audience full of politicians, something feels so fake and forced in their enthusiastic response. It's because they're trying to like, okay, you can do it. You can do it. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can get through this speech.
There was a bunch of people with their fingers crossed, their toes crossed last night.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's just, so here's the thing. If any Republican president, I don't care who he was, right? Not just the last guy, but the 10 people before him who were presidents of the United States ever did something like this, which is epically stupid. And I mean, it would be front page of the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Baltimore Sun, the Los Angeles Times, everywhere, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, Trump was all over for much less.
And get this, podcast listeners. So in addition to that, so you had the State of the Union address, right? So you got all elected officials at the national level and the Supreme Court in one large room at the Capitol. And the Biden administration asked the states to send their National Guards to DC because they were so concerned about, I guess, some sort of
insurrection
or something like that. And here's the thing. Okay, we have to be very careful when we talk about this because I'm going to be very careful, kind of, I rarely am, but I have to be because if you have a federal government and the federal government, Matt, is engaging in policies that are literally destroying the economy, and then you have an American public that's really upset that they have realized that the federal government has policies like increasing gasoline and energy and inflation in general, destroying the United States economy, then who's in the right for wanting to go to the Capitol and start protesting and saying, we didn't vote for this. We didn't vote for this kind of economy. We didn't vote for this kind of America. We voted for an America where the government is limited and is supposed to leave us alone. But now we have the federal government weaponized with a military, which are National Guards, and saying, hey, states, send your National Guards to DC because those daggone deplorables might show up again and try to what? Overthrow the government? I mean,
with flagpoles.
With flagpoles.
I mean, look, it was an army.
Don't tread on me flags, right?
Yeah, it was
which apparently are racist.
It was an armless insurrection.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I think this should be really concerning to a lot of people that the overreaction and when they're personally scared. And it's like, we need to send a National Guard in case somebody's planning something somewhere. And this is problematic because for 4 years under the Trump administration, I mean, I remember watching cities burn down. I remember DC under siege for 3 days to the point where they had to hide the president, in the bunker for the first time since like World War II.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there was no National Guard caught up then.
And so,
I think Maryland afterwards put their National Guard in to squash some of this.
So
But
Republican,
it wasn't when it was
Okay.
happening.
So Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced right before the State of the Union address that he was not going to deploy the Florida National Guard and send them to the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. He's like, I'm not going to do that. So he tweets out, last week, the Biden administration requested the assistance of the state National Guards to deploy to Washington, D.C. I have rejected this request. There will be no Florida National Guard sent to D.C. for Biden's State of the Union. And, here's the thing. And we started talking about this before. And again, this is a very delicate subject because, otherwise we're going to have the FBI knocking on our door. But maybe the FBI should wake up and understand why it is that so many Americans are finding it necessary to show up to D.C. like never before. I mean, you talked about previous times that this has happened, but it's very compelling when people who really aren't political one day walk out their front door and say, I have to do more. I have to do more because our government is destroying our country.
Well, this is a constitutional right for Americans to go up there and peacefully protest. And other than the January 6th, which they love to bring up, I'm not aware of anyone on the right in the last, 2 or 3 decades when they had protests. Has it not been non-peaceful? I mean, I remember going to different Tea Party rallies and them trying to drum up the same fear, like, oh, we have the one guy planted with a, rebel flag walking through there. And you saw this even play out up in Canada recently, where they tried to plant people in there to try to create a false
It's a really good point. But the thing is everything that you just said, someone from the left is going to say, yeah, Matt, but here's the thing. It was the conservatives that showed up and the deplorables that showed up on January 6th during the insurrection, and they broke into the United States Capitol. So why shouldn't the government send the National Guard in there to make sure that that doesn't happen again? And
well, I'll tell you, the National Guard should get involved, and the request might have been made. I don't know if we don't have the inside information on that, if there was credible threats. But I would just say that this administration has a track record of overreacting and refuses to hear the wishes of the American people.
But you know what? Here's my position. Here's my response to that previous question that I asked. A smart government, right? A smart government would wake up and look at why there are so many people that are showing up and want to come to the Capitol and protest. A smart government would wake up and say, maybe we aren't doing the will of the people.
But Mark, they're not.
Maybe we're not.
I think that's the point. They're not a smart government. They're a totalitarian government, because most smart government.
The Biden administration is. You're saying, okay.
Yes, but because most smart governments or smart politicians would have realized the shellacking that they got back in November in Virginia and then New Jersey and changed course. And they didn't. The next week, we're going to put through a Build Back Better. We're going to throw through a major infrastructure bill. We're going to throw money out of the sky. And, now we're paying for the price of that with, record high inflation.
And at the same time, Biden administration, do you know, with all of the sanctions, one sanction they did not put into place was a sanction to continue to purchase oil from Russia. We are still purchasing oil from Russia.
But they're gonna stop like 30 million barrels or something, right?
Because we're not producing enough oil here.
2 days?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we're not producing enough. Well, it's the National Reserve. They're going to dip into that, so it's like 2 days worth of oil. But
it should open up drilling on federal property.
But
renew the permits.
Therein lies, podcast listeners, why the American people from all walks of life are trying to go to D.C. and the FBI is probably picking up, and so is the CIA and all the other, quite frankly, out of control agencies are picking up regular American people.
Because their actions don't match their rhetoric.
That's exactly right. They're picking up, the FBI, though, is picking up regular American people who are getting on the phone and texting each other going, you know what, I'm going to go to D.C. because I'm just sick and tired of this crap that they're doing. And then what happens is you have the very federal government that you have the right to petition redress to, who's saying, I'm going to bring in all of these federal agencies and maybe even the state National Guards as well to be able to stop you and or make you look like you are radicalizing because you think that you don't have the right to be here and talk about what's going on with your country. This is, podcast listeners, we're talking about this very carefully because otherwise we'll get a little knock on the door from the FBI saying, hey, you guys are talking about something. You're talking about, maybe
Inciting violence.
Yeah, inciting violence. No, folks, we aren't inciting violence. What we're trying to do is say this. Our government is inciting violence. Our government, through its actions, is destroying the very country that all of us have built over the generations. And we can disagree over the fact that oil, natural gas, and coal, we can disagree about their use in the economy or not use in the economy. But here's what we can't disagree about. We can't disagree about the fact that when you stop the production of those overnight and you can no longer afford to heat your house or put gasoline in your car, that your government is actually working against you. You can't just stop an economy. And that is exactly what the Democrats are doing. They, through their actions, Matt, I believe, are radicalizing the people of this country in a way that I've never seen before in my life.
Yeah. I mean, you go up there and say, you know what? I don't like this. And it's like, well, you're committing violence.
Yes, we're going to lock you up.
Yeah.
And we're not going to have anyone talk to you. And we're not going to even want anyone to interview you. See, this is the key thing. We want you to talk to no one because we're going to put you in solitary confinement until you confess that you were trying to do something nefarious against the United States government. It's like, no, dude.
Well,
I'm not trying to do something nefarious. I just want the United States government to start listening to the fact that they're destroying the economy.
I mean, it's the same strategy they used in Salem.
Yeah.
We'll just drive around, put all the conservatives in the truck, and we'll just dunk them in water.
So next up, podcast listeners, a congresswoman, there were two of them, heckles Biden during the State of the Union address. Yes, they did. So Representative Lauren Boebert erupts at Biden's SOTU, which is the State of the Union address, and shouts about the 13 Americans killed in Afghanistan. Something, as you probably recall, since Joe Biden didn't have a State of the Union address last year, of course, because of COVID. And then it's been so long since his withdrawal, if you want to call that, from Afghanistan, that he no longer wants to talk about Afghanistan. Now it's all about Ukraine. Now he has a new opportunity. So Republican, this is in the Daily Caller, Colorado Republican Lauren Boebert interrupted President Joe Biden during his State of the Union address Tuesday night, mentioning the 13 U.S. service members who were killed in Afghanistan. Well, as Biden described veterans exposed to burn pits developing cancer, okay, let's repeat this again. As Biden described veterans exposed to burn pits developing cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. Now, I have to explain what this means. Apparently, there are U.S. servicemen who were in Afghanistan who were exposed to pits where they were burning U.S. machinery and very sensitive equipment that we had in Afghanistan. So those soldiers were told, hey, burn that stuff because we don't want it to get into the wrong hands. Usually it's computer chips and, very sensitive things. So they did. And so Biden is like, yeah. And so as a result of the burn pits, Americans are going to come home in flag-draped coffins. And so, of course, what happened? Representative Boebert's like, yeah, how about the 13 Americans in Afghanistan? They came home in flag-draped coffins. So, by the way, it's true. That's exactly what happened. We have a clip on this, and here it is.
Headaches, numbness, dizziness. A cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know. One of those.
So, Matt, by the way, the protocol is whenever you're in a chamber and you're an elected official, there is a certain decorum that you're supposed to work at and abide by. It's a better way of putting it. And that decorum is that you don't speak unless you're called on, and that there's a reason for that, because otherwise you'd have an all-out brawl and people start, hitting each other and beating each other up like you see in so many other countries. So this is probably not a good idea on the one hand. On the other hand, it's certainly understandable why Representative Boebert, would say that.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously she spoke out of turn there. Can't be a big fan of that if you're an elected official, and because you're held to a certain standard and you want a certain decorum. But I tell you what, I really like how the much courage, like the courage to go ahead and throw this out there. It's probably a little bit of frustration on her part because, well, let's face it, the media doesn't cover this.
Oh, ever.
And look, and they just let Democrats off with a free pass constantly. Sure. And this is an important issue. I mean, there's 13 service members gave up their life in just a chaotic withdrawal. I mean,
they did.
It wasn't right.
They did. In the New York Post, okay?
I mean, they don't even call it a withdrawal. It was a surrendering.
Absolutely. So in the New York Post, current and former members of Congress on both sides of the aisle criticized Republican Representatives Lauren Boebert of Colorado and guess who else? Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia over their heckling of President Biden during Tuesday's State of the Union address. Throughout Biden's speech, this is what you have to listen to, podcast listeners. Throughout Biden's speech, Greene was spotted making faces and muttering, particularly when the president spoke about administering COVID-19 vaccines to children. She also yelled out, "Build the wall," when Biden said that it was necessary to secure the border. By the way, I heard this too, Matt. Like, Biden said that his way of securing the border was putting up a bunch of cameras. And it's like, we already have a way. It's called a wall, and all the materiel is sitting on the ground. And you
mean like the one they're building around the Capitol?
So
for last night?
So yes, and do you wonder why the American people are showing up at the Capitol and they're being somewhat radicalized? Because they hear this guy and he's lying. They're destroying our country, and the people are sick of it. And by the way, FBI, I don't ever condone radicalization in any way, but we have a president of the United States that's causing this by saying, well, the way we're going to stop people from coming into this country and invading our country is by not building a wall. No, we're going to put cameras up when in fact we have a wall.
Right. And then they'll come out the next week, the next day, say, you know what, this president's done more for border security than any other president in the history of the United States.
More for
like,
border security.
Like,
yes,
they'll come out and just look at you straight to the camera, not blink because they're sociopath, and just lie to you. And I think that's what some of the frustration is. I know that's probably happening with the elected officials. I'm glad those two women do have a lot of courage to speak up.
Right, women
because they have some nerve. I tell them
they do. So Congresswoman Boebert again. She decided, you know what? This guy is the biggest liar. He's up there telling one lie after another. And he's talking about burn pits in Afghanistan and how American citizens are going to come home in coffins. First of all, we're gone. We're not there. Second of all, yes, American military personnel did burn stuff so that it didn't get into the wrong hands. And now, of course, the president's saying they're going to come home in coffins because of that. They're already home, at least, it took long enough because Biden left so many people
back there. Maybe he flew them into Baltimore.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So I just want to listen to this Congresswoman again when she heckles him one more time. Here's that clip. Listen.
Headaches, numbness, dizziness. A cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know. One of those.
So, I mean, look.
How dare her interrupt his pandering?
It's just amazing that any human being that has half of a brain could listen to this speech, Matt, and say that anything that he talked about was in any way a reflection of what's really happening in the world right now. Because it's not. It's just not.
I agree.
Yeah, exactly. So next up, podcast listeners, Biden ignores completely Tesla in the State of the Union address. So Biden ignores Tesla in the State of the Union address. Elon Musk slams Biden's State of the Union address after Tesla snub. And so it's pretty funny what Musk does. Now, remember, Musk was the darling of the left because of electric cars, EVs, as they call them, electric cars. And now that Musk is very successful and if not the richest, one of the richest persons in the world, he has the freedom to say what he's always wanted to say, which is, you guys are full of crap over there on the left. So billionaire, and this is in the New York Post, billionaire Elon Musk couldn't resist jabbing at President Biden after he omitted any mention of Tesla from the portion of his State of the Union address dedicated to electric vehicle investments. Biden highlighted his push for more domestic manufacturing by noting Tesla's rivals, General Motors and Ford, were investing in a combined $18 billion to build out electric vehicle capacity in the United States. So in other words, podcast listeners, Joe Biden had a section in his State of the Union speech about EVs, electric vehicles. And he decided to not talk about Tesla whatsoever or even mention them by name. He only mentioned General Motors and Ford, of course. And why do you suppose, Matt?
Because Elon Musk doesn't suck up to these people anymore. They're
And
non-union plant.
Because Elon Musk's plant is not unionized.
And
Yes.
you know, you're right. He was the darling of the left for so long. And now he's not, because the guys actually came out as being like an engineer type, entrepreneur, and more importantly, a capitalist.
Yes.
And they hate it. And they held him up for so long as being like, he's one of us. Elon was proof that the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act from President Obama wasn't just a total bust of $800 billion.
It's the only thing that worked.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like the only thing that worked.
They
The only
injected
thing.
money in the Tesla, and he built cars for their fancy friends, right? Because those are the only ones that could
Yes, he
afford
did.
them.
Exactly.
Have you ever seen a Chevy Volt lately?
No, I haven't.
I haven't seen a Chevy Volt.
It's like a Fred Flintstone car. You still need to like put your feet
I mean, they
underneath
don't
like
even
that
have
and go
those,
like that.
those things in the House of Delegates.
So get this, Joe Biden, he tweets out, you know, obviously someone who tweets for Joe Biden, because I'm sure Joe can't spell, let alone use a computer or anything that's technical. But during the speech, the Joe Biden administration Twitter account, of course, Trump can't have a Twitter account. The Biden Twitter account is, Ford is investing $11 billion to build electric vehicles, creating 11,000 jobs across the country. GM is making the largest investment in its history, $7 billion to build electric vehicles, creating 4,000 jobs in Michigan. Elon Musk responds, Tesla has created over 50,000 U.S. jobs building electric vehicles and is investing more than double GM and Ford combined. FYI, I'm responding to the person who controls the president's Twitter account.
Well, that's why they dislike him, right there.
I mean, this is just epic
they,
stuff.
They don't like him because they can't control him.
Yeah, that is the beauty. That is the beauty about being someone in his position, right? Because big tech has shut down so many people, and/or the woke class have tried to destroy people's careers, and in many cases have been successful, like trying to destroy Joe Rogan's career.
Right.
How are you gonna destroy one of the richest guys in the world when he's no longer on the reservation and he can do anything he wants?
And that's why he's a danger.
Unless you try to.
And that's why they exclude him and don't include him and there's a little speech.
Yeah, they're not going to cancel his Twitter account because he's not that he's cool enough because he has electric car company, but they are going to try to make him look like an idiot by not ever saying that he has accomplished what he's accomplished. And meanwhile, General
He's
Motors,
the richest man in the world.
General Motors was like bankrupt during the Obama administration, had to take federal money to be able to keep the doors open.
This is a guy that said one day, like, you know what, I want to start a rocket company. and it's successful. How's that? I mean,
Yeah,
that's hard to believe.
It is amazing. I mean, this guy really is a true genius and rocket scientist of his time. And then you have the president of the United States. It's like, yeah, but those union companies are just amazing. I mean, oh my gosh, they're doing so great. I mean, they've literally destroyed.
UAW.
Yeah, exactly. So next up, podcast listeners, Pelosi becomes a meme. Pelosi becomes a meme during the State of the Union address. She sparks a new SOTU meme during Biden's burn pits moment. So we have to set this up. So House Speaker Nancy Pelosi drew massive attention on social media during President Biden's State of the Union address Tuesday evening for her oddly giddy reaction to Biden's remarks about burn pits in the Middle East. During his address, the president outlined 4 items in a unity agenda for the nation that included support for U.S. veterans. Quote, my administration is providing assistance with job training and housing, and now helping lower income veterans get VA care debt-free. Our troops, quote, in Iraq and Afghanistan faced many dangers. One was stationed at bases and breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits, the president continued to applause. Many of you have been there. So what this is a giveaway, of course, by the Democrats to try to buy off the military with a large amount of free money to say, well, you were exposed to something bad. You're in the military. Of course, you're exposed to things bad, by the way. And therefore, you can get out of ever having to work again in your life, even if there's nothing wrong with you. And we're going to give you a big pot of money. So Nancy Pelosi, of course, this was her idea. And I think we have a tweet on this, an actual clip, don't we? We do. So we have a clip on this, podcast listeners, and Nancy Pelosi, as she's sitting behind the president of the United States, gets up and she goes like this. It's so weird. It's so weird. It's so creepy. We have that clip, and here it is.
And our troops in Iraq in Afghanistan have faced many dangers. One being stationed at bases breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits. Many of you have been there.
So then Nancy gets up and she's like this. And why? Why is she so excited? And it became a meme. She's so excited, podcast listeners and Matt, because of the fact that she thinks that this pot of money is going to be able to buy off the military and the veterans and the people still serving, because they'll get a pot of money. And in return, they're going to show their fealty to the Democrat Party for giving them cash.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like she just won the lottery.
It's like Nancy Pelosi's lottery. Actually, Nancy Pelosi's lottery is really just follow her stocks. Yeah. That's just like the lottery.
That
right?
is a sound investment tip there.
Yes.
That might even be better than Elon.
It is. I actually have a friend who follows Nancy Pelosi because there's a site out there that says Nancy Pelosi stock picks. And she just follows Nancy Pelosi's stock picks. And they always turn out really well.
But what drives these people? I mean, it's got to be self-preservation, power. I mean, you can tell like
corruption,
strife.
It shows you. Look,
we're going to do this.
The founding fathers knew that when a government had the ability to be able to pay off interest groups, that would potentially be the end of democracy, which technically, of course, is a democratically elected republic. We have a democratic republic, speak Mark. And the founding fathers, warned of the possibility that we could eventually have a government that just went and spent out of control and just buy off interest groups. And by the way, either party can do that. It's not just the Democrat Party, folks. The Republican Party has tried to do that too, right? Through specialized tax credits and breaks to certain individuals and or industries. This is something that's always upset me about, government. I don't even know how to fix it. But of course, Nancy Pelosi, she's an expert on this, right?
Right. I mean, because she's been doing it for 40, 50 years.
It's her life. And she's so good at
it. She's so good at it. She's risen to the top of her caucus.
She's risen to the top of her caucus. She's ahead of one of the most powerful people in the country. And at the same time, doesn't care about destroying the country in the process and our traditions, right? It's just there's no longer
she thinks the whole country is, the west side,
her.
Well, the west side of San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly. Extremely wealthy, and you have two classes in San Francisco. They're really poor and they're really rich. Like the middle class is disappearing really fast. So next up, podcast listeners, condescending Kamala. Did I say her name right? Condescending Kamala, or is it Kamala? I'm not really sure. So listen, Kamala Harris explains Russia-Ukraine conflict to Americans like they are third graders. So many have argued the Biden administration's inability to put forth a strong image may have contributed to Russia's decision to invade the Ukraine. A recent podcast appearance from Vice President Kamala Harris likely won't do much to quell those criticisms. Harris joined the Morning Hustle radio show on Tuesday, and the host, Headcrack. Oh, no, it's Headcrack. That's really the name of the host of this podcast. So Harris joined the Morning Hustle, and their host, Headcrack, primarily known as an authority on hip hop, so you can imagine his audience, asked her to explain the current situation in the Ukraine to the audience. So Headcrack has Kamala on, and he says, "Hey, Vice President Kamala Harris, can you tell our audience and really, about this whole Ukraine thing?" And remember, this is a hip hop audience, so I'm guessing not the brightest people. And by people, I'm not talking about race. Let's be careful. I'm talking about all different people that I know, white, black, brown, whatever. They listen to hip hop. All right. But if you're someone who follows this podcast, I'm thinking you probably don't read a lot of books about geography, okay, or history. Nonetheless, we have this clip, and here it is.
If you're watching any level of news, even social media, you're seeing everything that's going on right now in the Ukraine. Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't understand what's going on and how can this directly affect the people of the United States.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
So Russia is a big country, and the Ukraine is a smaller country. And Russia, as being the bigger country, invaded the smaller country because the smaller country was small.
I'm not sure I understand.
So the hip hop crowd is like, wow, man, that's really bad.
No, honestly, I go the other way on that. I think this was soft bigotry and low expectation. I mean, I think Headcrack is smart enough to understand what was going on. He was smart enough to ask her that question, and
maybe he should be Butt Crack. Maybe that should be his real name. You know,
I don't know what kind of crack he is, but
I'm sure they call him Crack for a reason, right? And Crack is like, hey, give me some more crack. You know?
Wonder why, like
Butt Crack.
You wonder why Russia and our foreign adversaries think this administration is a joke.
Well, of course it is.
It's clips like that.
It is. And we have to play this again. You have to listen to this again.
Well, we need to play it again because I'm not sure I get it. I want to hear it.
I don't understand, man. Can you do that one more time? We have the clip. Here it is.
If you're watching any level of news, even social media, you're seeing everything that's going on right now in the Ukraine. Break it down in layman's terms for people who don't understand what's going on and how can this directly affect the people of the United States.
So Ukraine is a country in Europe. It exists next to another country called Russia. Russia is a bigger country. Russia is a powerful country. Russia decided to invade a smaller country called Ukraine. So basically, that's wrong.
That's just wrong. That's just wrong.
You're right.
That's what she said. I mean, Headcrack probably looking at her like his eyes are cross-eyed because he at least knew what the Ukraine, I mean, Joe couldn't get that one, right?
Oh, no, exactly. It's the Kamala. Usually when she answers the question.
How did the Iranians play into this?
That's right. Well, usually Kamala, when she answers the question, it starts out with her laughing while she's trying to figure out an answer. But this time, even she couldn't understand how to answer the question because it was like, it's a big country invading a smaller country. And you said it well. It's like the expectation of, what did you say?
Soft bigotry.
Of soft bigotry, because you're basically saying Butt Crack's listeners
just don't even understand
Yeah,
this. When
exactly.
I mean, he sounded much more educated when he asked the questions.
You got that
he said
right.
in layman's terms, not like preschool terms, kindergarten terms.
Exactly. So, and that's condescending Kamala. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins, and our guest, Matt Morgan. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.